Yes, this
Okay.
is David Swindle, managing editor of NewsReal Blog, and I am here tonight talking with Howard Bloom, the author of three amazing books that I just reviewed the other week for Front Page Magazine. Howard is the author of, most recently, The Genius of the Beast, which was released in November of 2009, a radical revision of capitalism. He's also the author of Lucifer Principle, a scientific expedition into the forces of history, which was published in 1997. And his second book was Global Brain, the evolution of mass mind. I said it in that order because that's the order that I ended up reading them in, though I'm not sure, Howard, maybe you could suggest a better order to read them in. But
Well,
yeah,
go ahead.
but so I'm here with Howard because his ideas have really influenced me a great deal, and I think he frames the issues in a way that Newsreel Blog and Front Page Magazine readers can really appreciate and connect with. So I'd like Howard to talk a little bit about his books first, and then he and I will wrap a little bit about some of the subjects that we're most interested in here at Newsreel and Front Page. So, welcome, Howard. How are you doing tonight?
Thanks, David. I'm having a wonderful time because you're here.
So, yeah, if you want to just start off, this is introducing you to my audience. So, tell us a little bit about you and your books.
Well, okay. I started in science at the age of 10 in cosmology, theoretical physics, and microbiology, and then got sucked into the magazine world when I was a teenager, about 15 years old, 14 years old, and became absolutely fascinated with world affairs. And have been involved basically in pulling together as many sciences. I've been doing this now for over 50 years, pulling together as many of the sciences as one meager little brain can understand, because I do unfortunately have a meager little brain, putting them together with all of the history that I can possibly comprehend, and that's more than 50 years worth of learning about history, especially and trying to look at strange corners of the world, Chinese history, which was once strange, African history, and things like that, and pulling it all together with the arts and with current events. In order to fashion new perceptual lenses with which you can see the world in radically different ways from the ways you've ever seen it before.
That sounds accurate.
That's the effort. You never know whether it's going to succeed. And the first book, the Lucifer Principle, took the turn that it took because one day Peter Gabriel walked into my office. Another little thing. I've been in science all my life. Everybody knew I would be a college professor from the time I was 10 years old. And then I did something when I got all of my college fellowships, my graduate school fellowships. I did something very peculiar. I realized that because I was profoundly interested in the passions that change human history. I was profoundly interested in the passions at the heart of what William James called the religious experience, the weird passions, the strange passions, the overwhelming passions, the ecstatic passions, the kind of passions that Hitler used, for example, in order to mobilize Germany. He would throw a brilliantly art directed, stunningly choreographed torchlight parades. And people would stand by the thousands by the side of the road watching the torchlight marchers go by at night, and they would feel a sense of exaltation, of ecstasy, that they had never, ever known in their life. All of us want to be part of something bigger than ourselves, but we seldom get to experience the fact that we are. And those people watching those torchlit parades felt yanked out of themselves into some higher consciousness of a kind that exhilarated them. They felt when Hitler said, Ein Reich, ein Volk, ein Führer, one nation, one people, one leader, they felt caught up in that with all their hearts and souls. So, one of my tasks in life has been to find those primal emotions, those ecstatic emotions that do change the course of history, that Hitler knew how to play perhaps better than anybody else in the history of the world up to this point. And I was not going to find them in grad school. So, I jumped ship from grad school in order to study mass behavior and mass passions, and landed in a territory I knew absolutely nothing about. I was totally unqualified for. I was a kid who listened to Rachmaninoff and Beethoven and Bartok and Stravinsky. I ended up in popular culture. First, I ended up on the cover of Art Direction magazine, and then I founded the biggest PR firm in the music industry and worked building careers for people like Prince, Michael Jackson, Bob Marley, Bette Midler, AC/DC, Aerosmith, Kiss, Queen, Run DMC, and a whole mess of others, Paul Simon, Peter Gabriel, etc. Okay, now, one day, I was sitting in my office and I was beginning to plot out my books. I was beginning to build the base of what is now called, David, are you ready for this? Get your vomit bag. I I had begun something called the Grand Unified Theory of Everything in the Universe, including the Human Soul, which is now 6,400 chapters in the computer. But at that point, it was only the first few hundred chapters, and that's the body of work from which I was going to extract my first book. And Peter Gabriel walked into my office and he said, "You know, there's something you really should check out. It's this theory by Lynn Margulis and I forget the name of the scientist in England who was involved with Lovelace. No, that's not it. But at any rate, there's a scientist in England she had worked this out with, and it sounded really interesting. It sounded like a really big picture theory, the kind of theory that does involve yanking together as many sciences as a human brain can understand and putting them together into one giant picture. And I went to read it, and the first article that I found was in Natural Science. It was by Lynn Margulis, who is now a friend of mine and has been a supporter of my work, and Dorian Sagan, her son, Carl Sagan's oldest son, who is a brilliant science writer. And it described with enormous glee the mass die-off of trillions and trillions of bacteria approximately 1.2 to 2 billion years ago when there was a massive atmospheric pollution crisis, when the atmosphere was so tainted with toxic effluents that it killed off nearly everything on the face of the earth. And Lynn and Dorian seem to be glorying in this mass murder. Well, look, I grew up in the wake of World War II, and one of the lessons we learned from World War II is if there is mass murder going on somewhere, it is your job to stop it. And okay, the mass murder took place 2 billion years ago. It's a little late to stop it now. But the fact is, that kind of thing should not be celebrated. The fact that nature is allowed to get away with mass murder should not be celebrated. It should not even be allowed. The fact that when every creature on this planet has only one destination when it comes to life, and that is death. Death is more inevitable than taxes. It happens to every single one of us. Is that a kindly, sweet, and gentle nature? Is that a nature just loving us, opening her arms, waiting for us to treat her gently and harmonize with her so that she will give us a Garden of Eden that will forever stay green? Not by a long shot. That mother is a mother nature bitch. She has blood dripping from her fangs, for God's sakes. And it's up to us human beings to stop it. So I decided, since Lynn and her partner in England and her son Dorian had written glowingly about the atrocities of nature, that it was my job to write a book on the atrocities that actually excoriated them for what they were, vicious, bloody acts, and including those acts that have been implemented by mankind. Those acts, and so I focused my first book on the evil side of things, the dark side of things, to say this must not pass. We must not allow this kind of thing in the future. And that's why the first book, as opposed to the Gaia hypothesis, Lynn Margulis's idea, was called The Lucifer Principle, a scientific expedition into the forces of history. So that's how we got to book number one.
Right, right.
Any questions?
No, so book number one. I mean, my take on it was it's exploring evil and exploring what
Yes.
human nature is, and exploring.
Right.
In my review, I kind of stated that if you can boil down Howard Bloom to one basic concept, and it's an injustice to do that to you, but it's that we as human beings are a product of evolution, and we need to see who and what we are in the context of nature, in the context of what we came from, and by looking at nature all around us, we can understand what we are and where we're going. Is that accurate?
Yes, absolutely. And we
Okay,
have to look
good.
at nature. We have to stare nature in the face and realize how cruel she is and how creative she is. We have to understand both those things to survive and in order to do our job as Mother Nature come alive in a form that finally has consciousness and a conscience.
Right, right. Okay, so that's basically the idea for the first book. Then second book, Global Brain. Go.
Okay.